You're tuned in to Ask the Master Auto Technician. Car questions? Get answers right now. Call 850-763-0555.
James Auto Center, we fix it right, guaranteed. Beep, 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 yeah!
All right, good morning, everybody. This is Monday morning show of Ask the Master Auto Technician. We talk about everything from car maintenance and repair to maybe how your car is designed, maybe the airbag, the tire pressure monitoring system, and also how those things got on your car. You know, why do we have those? What do they do? How do they work? How come we have legislation that says we have to have those things? There's good reasons for having a lot of these things, and you know, some of them kind of go, well, couldn't it be an option? Well, it used to be an option to have tire pressure monitoring system back in the 90s, but by the time 2008 rolled around, it wasn't an option anymore. It's mandatory because they had so many cars having accidents with tires underinflated, causing the tire to blow out and to cause a wreck. And so that's why they mandated in 2008 to have tire pressuring monitoring systems. Same thing happened to seat belts. Seat belts were, I think they were an option to up to about 65, 66. That was an option you could have. But I want to say about 68, 69, I think 69, they were mandatory in all cars to have seat belts installed on them. There are certain things that, and this all has to do with the political system, how it works. If something seems like a good idea, let's continue on with it. And, in that area, I guess it's a good thing to do. But that is how we end up with a lot of things we have. Positive crankcase ventilation, PCV. You say, well, okay, what's that have to do? Well, it was law by 1968 that all cars have a positive crankcase ventilation. And the reason they did that is for emission requirements. Until that time, if you remember, if you had an old car, 67 or any lower than that, when the car was sitting there at idle, you'd see a puff of smoke below the engine where normally you see that is where it vented. It's called blow-by, would go out and it would go on the ground, putting oil into the groundwater and dropping on the street, which would run into the storm sewer. But that is exactly why they went to the positive crankcase ventilation, to keep emissions down. So what it does, it creates a positive kind of a vacuum suction on the crankcase, pulling all those blow-by gases back into the engine to be reburned. That way there's less pollution. The air is cleaner that way. If you look at take a look at a picture of the 1970s, mid-70s, say 73, 74, in that area, because I remember when I was in high school, they show pictures of Los Angeles during their pollution zone days where people were asked to wear a mask because it was so bad. You couldn't see 200 feet in front of you. But now we don't have those days anymore, all because of things such as pollution control, like positive crankcase ventilation, catalytic converters. Those things have a purpose. Do you get better gas mileage with the catalytic converter? No, not necessarily. But what you do get better gas mileage is with the computer that's on the car that's designed to save that catalytic converter to make sure it lasts a very long time for the life of the car. That's what gives you the better gas mileage. If anything, well, think about it. Back in the 60s and 70s, if we had a pickup truck and if it got more than 10, 15 miles per gallon, that was pretty darn good gas mileage. Well, right now we've got pickup trucks out there that produce over 300 horsepower that are getting 18, 19, 20 miles to a gallon. They got lots of power. The example I'm talking about is the Ford direct injection V6 twin turbo. That's an engine that has more horsepower at 3,000 RPMs than a 5.7 Hemi engine. Not horsepower, torque. Brake horsepower is what it has at 3,000 RPMs as far as torque and pulling. It's pretty impressive how these things work together. And they're all doing it to make sure we keep our air a little cleaner, to keep our air a little bit, where it doesn't get, think about it. We've got over 300 million cars on the road. Back in the 70s, we had about 100 million, if not, I want to say it's around 80 million cars on the road back in the 70s, and we had a lot more pollution. Well, we got 3 times as many cars now, and we have a lot less pollution. So I'm not saying that all laws out there are bad, but you have to think about what the unintended consequences may be. We're going to talk about tire pressure monitoring system. I talked about that. The unintended consequences of it is every 5 to 7 years, you get to spend another $600 to $800 to replace them. What? Yeah, they have batteries in them. They go bad. So that unintended consequence is you have to replace. That's going to be an added expense into your maintenance schedule. that you have to figure in every on about your second change of tires, which is normally about I'd say about 5 to 7 years. Somewhere in that area, you have to get another set of tires. Those tire pressure monitoring sensors need to be exchanged. People that don't exchange them, they will be coming back very soon to replace one, then another one, then another one, then another one. And they really don't do the thing you want them to do because, well, if the light's on all the time, you don't know if your tires are low or not. So in order for it to work properly, you have to do that. You have to change them. It's like the airbag problem, the unintended consequences of the airbag. They found out after they get a certain age on them, not only do the airbags, they will deploy, but they can deploy and actually come apart and actually kill people. The unintended consequences of sometimes government legislating how we're supposed to do things, you don't realize what happens when age goes by, what happens to that product. It's like wires on a car. Years ago, when cars were made in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, we didn't think much about the wiring. It lasted a long time. Well, we're seeing now where wiring dissolves or starts to come apart relatively quick. After a car gets about 10, 15 years on it, we see it starting to fall apart. Or it gets eaten up by mice or rodents. And the reason is it's made from soybean, which is kind of hard to believe, but it actually, it's biodegradable, this insulation around the wiring is. So there's a good possibility that cars were built in the years, in the 90s and 2000s and newer, they won't be around for 40, 50, 60 years, or the wiring won't be, because it all just kind of dissolve and go away. Everything's plastic too. We know what happens to plastic. Once it gets old, it gets brittle, it falls apart, especially if you let it sit out in the sun. So, the days of having a car, by the year 2050, there won't be very many classic 2016s running around. If they are.
Yeah, it's interesting that you discussed that, because I can remember whenever I first started driving that the dash in the car was metal.
Yes, and the reason they got rid of it was because
I'm sure it was dangerous.
It was dangerous, that metal dash.
I think we didn't even have seat belts at that time.
We didn't. Like I said, seat belts were not mandatory. I want to say 68 or 69 before they were mandatory. I may be off a year or two, but it was in that area because I remember.
Well, that explains why my car didn't have seat belts. It was a 49.
Well, of course it didn't have seat belts, 49. I remember when Tucker came out with his I saw the movie Tucker, they laughed at him for having seat belts because they said, your car is so unsafe, you have to have seat belts in there. And they laughed at him for having tempered glass in his car too. I mean, there was a lot of things that he was light years ahead on. Seat belts, tempered glass, glass that would actually break away from the car and not hurt the person. It would stay together. It was, that's where the tempered would come in, or it would laminate it. That's what I'm trying to say. Laminated, where it had plastic wedged in between it, so when it did break, it didn't shatter and cut people. It stayed together. That was some of the innovations that came out when Tucker Automobile came out. And he also had a center headlight. Wherever you turn the steering wheel, the headlight would actually move in the direction that you were turning. It was all mechanical. It wasn't electrical, but it was still light years ahead when they have cars now that do the same thing, but they're doing it electronically. As you turn the steering wheel, the headlights shift a little to the right or to the left.
Well, now, don't you imagine that the manufacturers are going to realize that they've made a mistake with the soy-based insulation on the wiring and move away from that?
Well, the question is, does it get through warranty? That is the question that is asked by every decision maker out there when it comes to cars. Will it get through warranty? Will it last, at least through warranty without any problems? And the answer is yes. It will get through warranty. It is a what they call a renewable source of product where they renew it, but it does break down over a period of time. It becomes very brittle. It becomes an attractant to rodents. They like to eat it. I don't know how many Toyotas we've had come in here over the years,
and Volkswagens,
oh that the rodents have gotten inside the car. What was the last? We had a we had a Subaru.
Yeah,
they
Subaru
love eating the wires. The insulation is from a soybean compound, and they just love to eat it, especially if the car doesn't get moved and it sits in a spot for long.
If you let it sit for a week, go on vacation.
It can. I don't know if about a week, but it doesn't take long before those little critters can move in and start chewing things up, especially in the wintertime. That's when we see it the most because, well, there's not as much food in the wintertime, and they have a tendency to look for things to eat, and and your car happens to be right there, so why not? So that's one of the disadvantages of that type on cars. But you know, it's all about money on that part. If you have thousands and thousands of cars and you can save an extra 50 cents to $1 per car, that adds up. And it does get through warranty, but just a word of, you know, please be careful in the wiring as cars get older and older. You know, cars that were made in the 90s and 2000, that wiring becomes very, very brittle. And that becomes a lot of problems on drivability, becomes a lot of problems on charging systems. We get excessive voltage drop. And I've got someone, I can't even read it, Mert on a 05 Grand Marquis. Anyway, we've got a question, and we got about 3 minutes left. Let's see if I can help answer his question. What's your question? Go ahead, Mert. Mert, what is your question about your Grand Marquis?
Well, I have a airbag light that flashes. It'll, when I turn the key on, it flashes about 3 times, and then it stays on.
Well, that's a code that's trying to tell you there's a problem. And what that means, it means...
Wait just a minute, I can't hear you.
Okay.
Hold on just a minute.
All right, all right, Mert. That is telling you got a code in there. There's a problem. It needs to be addressed. And if you will take, you say it's an 05, so it's a 2005. If you'll go to, well, if you want to, you can come by James Auto Center. I'll grab a factory scanner. I can plug in, and it will tell me the areas of concern. But normally, if you have an airbag light that's staying on, when that light flashes, that means your airbags will not work if you have an accident.
Will not work if you have an accident.
They will not work if you have an accident. That's what that light means. It gave you a code. I don't know what that code means without looking it up. But it does mean that if you do have an accident, your airbags will not deploy. And it could be something very, very simple. It could be a fuse. It could be a bad clock spring. It could be a dozen different things. But if you'll come by here, James Auto Center, 1301 East 11th Street, call first. I'll grab a scanner. I'll walk out and say, ma'am, these are the codes that it has. This is how much time I need to figure out what's wrong with it. And then you'll say, either fine, figure it out, or you're out of your mind. I don't want to do that. You know? But that's what I'm going to advise, Mert. Get that looked at, because that is a safety issue. It really does. And you want to make sure that airbag does work if you get into a wreck, because it can save your life.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for calling, and I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now, this is James Morris. If you got a car question, you want to be part of the show, give us a call, 850-763-0555. I've got Scott Hobbs should be calling in a few minutes. We're going to be talking about preventive maintenance. We're going to be talking about, well, one of the things I like to talk about is, you know, he says he has a septic tank company. They pump septic tanks out, and they have to go all the way to St. Joe, or they have to go to Campbellton by appointment, or Pensacola to drop these off, to drop off the waste. And I'm sitting here going, can't we do that here locally? And he seems to think that we probably can. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll be right back. This is James Morris along with Anna Marie Morris. Don't touch that dial.
James Auto Center, we fix it right.